different, but I want to talk about just be honest about what goes on in my own head. Yeah. One of the greatest temptations I'm facing right now is getting lazy with my style and saying I ain't appreciating Mike's down. I serve too small a market, I need a larger target. You know, a broader audience who's spending dollars on this. And as of right now, this temptation for making some crazy statements, complaining, but I know how pride sounds. I'm everybody's favorite, maybe one of the greatest. The peak of every playlist. You'd be a lame to hate this, but the truth is it's foolish to say this. So please bear with my foolishness, cause I've concluded it's stupid to fake it. I Google my name too much, think that my fame is just, but still it ain't enough. I need to make some bucks, but not in the greedy sense.
Welcome to Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. It's your old pal Jake. We got a kind of a fun one today because we don't have to do all that much. Kari Lake, failed gubernatorial candidate, has thoroughly lost her lawsuit. Like any good Trumpist, she refuses to believe in democracy, so she contested the results of her election in court against Katie Hobbs and lost. But not only did she lose, the judge is clearly done with her nonsense. And my personal theory on this is that given the country we live in, people in power are only concerned with protecting their own power. And the courts do recognize that if we devolve into an oligarchy, their power diminishes. So we fortunately have greed on the side of good for once, if even accidentally, in the form of judges just being fed up with the legal shenanigans that Trumpists do. Kari Lake is no different. Well, perhaps she's slightly different in that it is so blatant, her corruption and her lack of caring for what the American people have to say about who their leader should be, that the judge is now encouraging the legal consequences to happen in the form of having Kari Lake have to pay for Katie Hobbs's attorney fees. Here's a channel I recommend to everybody. Brian Tyler Cohen does a show with Glenn Kirshner called The Legal Breakdown. I'm going to play some of their video they just did on this today because I think it is educational, certainly. Presuming that I can get it to play. Here we are. This is Brian Tyler Cohen and Glenn Kirshner talking about this most recent development. Let's hear a little bit of this.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So Glenn, in the aftermath of Kari Lake having sued and lost in her effort to just be declared the winner in the 2022 gubernatorial election in Arizona, Governor-elect Katie Hobbs and Maricopa County filed for sanctions against Lake. So what are the sanctions here, and are they strictly monetary, or is there further punishment that could come out of this?
So Governor-elect Katie Hobbs is seeking monetary sanctions. Basically, she's asking the court to order Kari Lake personally, not the taxpayers, to compensate her, Katie Hobbs' lawyers to the tune of more than $500,000. So that's a monetary sanction. The other thing that could happen here is the judge could sua sponte, that is on his own, order that Kari Lake's lawyers be referred to bar counsel for investigation of possible misconduct. Perhaps the attorneys will be sanctioned by the bar. And
they absolutely must be sanctioned by the bar. I would hope that those who have jurisdiction over the licenses of anybody that practice law on behalf of a Trumpist over the last couple of years acts, because you can't keep letting these people have free shots. But this is what you can do, not necessarily what they can do. Let's keep listening.
That could obviously include being disbarred if the abuse of the process and the system is deemed to be egregious enough.
It was.
And now these sanctions are paid by Kari Lake herself, correct? This isn't funded by any Arizona taxpayers, is it?
Well, Kari Lake, of course, she is already out there trying to raise money for her attorney's bills. Where have we heard that sort of thing before? Of course, we also hear her say things like, that the Maricopa County election officials should be locked up. I mean, and she ran as an election denier. She brought a frivolous challenge claiming the election has been rigged. Really, all that seems to be left for Kari Lake is a bad blonde comb over and a really nasty orange spray tan, and her metamorphosis into Trump may be complete.
In effect, the people who've donated to Kari Lake, the people who you're referring to, are basically just funding a completely doomed effort to try and overturn the election. Like, these people are basically just setting their money on fire.
I do want to say, I hope the people that have funded Trump over the last couple of years, where he has essentially pretty out in the open just taken their money, I hope they do a class action suit against the man and Kari Lake as well. They have really opened up a cottage industry of scamming right-wingers. And while I'm delighted to have right-wingers bleed out their own power through the donations to people that have no interest in helping them, I mean, we got to have justice in the U.S., and getting it is going to involve people standing up for themselves. So, yeah, even though I hate them, I hope the right-wingers do indeed sue the people that have been scamming them. Let's hear a little bit more of this.
Because there's no way that this trial would have gone any other way, correct?
Yeah, and this is the third. This is really a hat trick of lost lawsuits that have been brought challenging Arizona election results. There was one brought by the Republican candidate for Attorney General, one brought by the Republican candidate for Secretary of State. This is the third time an Arizona court has ruled there was no election fraud. In fact, Judge Thompson, who presided over the Kari Lake trial, the Kari Lake challenge, ruled that nobody who wanted to cast a vote was unable to cast a vote. All votes were counted, even if there were some mechanical malfunctions or glitches on the day of the election. None of it impacted the election's results.
So Brian Tyler Cohen and Glenn Kirshner go on there, but the summary here is that the Katie Hobbs is very likely to put some monetary hurt on Kari Lake. $500,000 is nothing to laugh at, and I wouldn't doubt that Trump could scam his followers out of that much money. I think it's possible. There's enough gullible people to fund Kari Lake's legal bills for this, but it does make it harder. It makes it more difficult. So, Hobbs is Katie Hobbs is not even in office yet, but kudos to her, because her first act as a governor-elect, I suppose, has been to actually hold a right-winger accountable. Good on her. So she gets one thumbs up in my book. Now we have some just a wild scandal. I'd like to show you a video. Morning Joe, the people who are subbing in for Joe and Mika and the gang over the holidays, talking about a fella named George Santos. This guy is a con artist who conned his way in New York into a House seat. There's two things I want to underline going in. Three, actually, why not? Number one, the New York Democratic Party is a weak organization. They have had so many own goals that at this point it's ridiculous that anybody that has been in charge there is still in charge. It is purely corruption that's keeping them there. Case in point being the way they handled the last election cycle. Aside from losing to George Santos, who a tiny bit of research would have revealed to be a massive liar, they also were some of the few Democrats responding to a false narrative about the crime wave. And they were some of the few that lost seats. They are the reason that we don't control the House right now. Should have been easy for them to hold on to seats. They managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, as the joke goes. But let's have a look at this, because thing number 2 I want to talk about is how corporate media can tell a story and yet chicken out in all the right ways to avoid making it clear who was at fault. So they're going to tell you about George Santos, but I'm going to chime in as well with what they are not being blatant enough about.
Congressman-elect George Santos admitting that he lied about several key details in his experience and biography. In an interview with the New York Post, Santos confessed to what he called embellishing his resume, but insists he will serve in the next Congress. Santos confessed he had never worked directly for Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, chalking that fib up to a, quote, poor choice of words. He also admitted that he never graduated from any college, despite previously claiming to have received a degree from Baruch back in 2010. Quote, I didn't graduate from any institution of higher learning. I'm embarrassed and sorry for having embellished my resume. I own up to that. We do stupid things in life. Santos was also accused of lying about his family history, saying on his campaign website that his mother was Jewish and his grandparents escaped the Nazis during World War II. I never claimed to be Jewish, Santos said. I am Catholic. Because I learned my maternal family had a Jewish background, I said I was Jew-ish. Let's do that again. Santos says that he's not Jewish, he's Jew-ish.
Okay, off to a strong start. I'm glad they're hammering him on that ridiculous phrasing, but let's wait for him to get nice and weak.
I'm glad we've cleared that up. Santos' resume was first called into question earlier this month when a New York Times article pointed out several inconsistencies in his official biography. At the time, Santos' lawyer called the Times piece defamatory. Santos flipped a blue district that helped deliver the GOP the House majority. Republican leaders that backed him, including Kevin McCarthy and Elise Stefanik, have not yet commented on the controversy.
Shocking.
But the Post also notes this. Senior House Republicans were apparently aware of the inaccuracies and embellishments in the representative-elect's resume.
So just to be clear, because they're not underlining this, Republicans knew he was a liar. I don't think very highly of Democrats, but do you think they would have let that go, honestly, if they had a candidate that was doing that? I actually don't. I think they are smart enough to know, or rather, I think their voting base cares enough about these things that they would know they can't get away with it. They would. Long term, the party's health would be hurt so much by having a obvious con artist candidate that wouldn't fly. But let's keep going.
And that topic became a running joke. Multiple insiders close to the House GOP leadership told the paper over the weekend. NBC News has attempted to reach Santos for comment overnight, but did not immediately hear back. Elise Jordan joins the table now as well. Elise Jordan.
I'm Jewish.
Take it.
I'm Jewish. Hey, why not? I think that's a great T-shirt. You can't believe it. I think of all the good people who hesitate to go into politics because they're scared about something they did in college. And then you've got this guy who claims to work for prestigious banks and have an animal welfare charity and had these homes when he's living with his sister. And he just chalks it up to poor judgment. Well, poor judgment, alas. I think there's a little bit of that involved here.
John Howman,
he's a con
have we
artist.
reached a new low?
A new low? No, I think what we were talking just a second ago, talking about the Biden way as a strategy of contrasting itself against Donald Trump and deciding that it would be a good idea to say that, hey, you know, when he hangs out with neo-Nazis, we should say we're against Nazis. And when he says that we should tear down the Constitution, we are for the Constitution.
It's a pretty simple playbook.
We've already hit that, like we hit bottom a while ago. This dude, like, even look, it is the reality. I don't want to in any way make light of him because he is a comical example. Politics littered with examples of lying liars who lie, and many who've lied about their resumes. The thing is, at least, they usually do get caught. Eventually, they do get caught. So it's like people who are scared that, like, hey, you know, if I had this problem in my past, maybe I shouldn't get into politics because someone will find out. They probably will. And that's what this is what it looks like. You get made into a laughing stock if you decide to make up things whole cloth about your background. This gentleman will be the butt of jokes for the rest of his life, and rightly so. I will say about myself, I'm not a journal, but I am a journalist. You know, ist, you know?
So, Eddie, obviously there will be jokes made about George Santos today, probably over the next 4 hours. But there is a more...
So they're trying to get there. They're what they need to underline, what they need to stress, because the average American hears their patter and gets lost in the weeds. It's not political parties doing this. It's political party. It's not that politicians are doing this these days. He was saying, he was just hinting at it, but he hasn't come out and that last fella didn't come out and just stomp on Republicans and be like, Republicans are like this. Now, if you follow politics, you know what he's saying. You need to say these things, particularly if you're on a national television show like that, plainly enough so that the guy watching the closed captions on the TV when it's in a Denny's playing over the cashier's head as you're waiting to check out, that guy gets that this is a Republican thing, because he will glance at that and he'll think, yeah, all politicians are liars, and move on. This is not a story about politicians being con men. This is a story about right-wing politicians being con men, and they really have not touched on the scary parts about this.
Serious aspect of this is the idea that the Republican
a little redemption
leadership
coming.
knew, turned a blind eye, apparently had a good laugh behind closed doors about it, and now have gone silent.
Oh, absolutely. Over the last 6 years in our politics, lying has become a kind of consistent feature of the landscape. It's been tolerated, it's been accepted, and it's
not amongst everyone.
Let's be clear, lying has always been a part of politics, right? I mean, we know that. But to the extent to which we've experienced it over the last 6 years, it's been kind of overwhelming, right, in terms of the way in which conversation happens. But I think it's really important here that we have a political party, operatives who knew this, they were okay with it.
Again, he didn't say we have Republicans and Republican operatives who knew this. He said a political party. It is so ingrained in corporate media and in law enforcement to not go after Republicans that they notice that they hesitate to say Republicans did this. They find every turn of phrase they can use to go around saying that Republicans did this. And this is a Republican problem. It is a Republican problem.
We have a state political party that is silent with regards to these allegations, these revelations with regards to Santos.
State
we have
party.
leadership, McCarthy and Stefanik, silent with regards to what is being revealed. And it shows, to my mind, a kind of level of corruption, a level of moral corruption, I should say, right, at the heart of a major political party that should raise
Which
a lot of
one?
alarms.
You know, but it wasn't like Robert Zimmerman, the Democrat, who was defeated by George Santos, Mr. Jewish. He had money. There was a fair amount of outside spending, at least over $1 million in outside spending, and yet not one opposition researcher or firm was enlisted to do a dossier on this guy, or even just to, run a credit check. Or
She is right here. Although, notice that when it came time to dunk on the Democrats, they didn't hesitate to say Democrat. They don't have a problem with that, because they go, oh, if we dunk on Democrats, we're fair and balanced. And if we dunk on Republicans, then we look biased. It is the opposite of that, you idiots. But she's not wrong. Why exactly did they not discover this during the race, when it mattered? Because right now, the only way to get rid of Santos would be for the House to expel him with a 2/3 vote, which simply can't happen. Republicans are too corrupt. You'll never get enough of them on board. So, in fact, I'm not even sure if you could do that in New York. Not even, worth looking into for future races, but the point being, he's there now for 2 years. The Democrat Party, or the Democratic Party in New York, their leadership needs to go. We'll get on to what you can do about that in a minute. I'm going to let her finish talking.
It's such malpractice. And it also speaks to the corruption of money in politics, where all this money is being spent, yet not for any purpose that actually serves the candidate.
A failure of Democratic opposition research, a failure of journalism not to catch it initially, but obviously most of all a failure of Republicans. The editorial board of the New York Daily News is calling for Santos to step aside after these revelations.
He's a con man. Of course he won't. All right, so up there, and I'm sorry I don't recall their names. I will be rightly dunked on for that. But up there, the gal that finished that segment gets the highest marks. She is correct. We already know that fella and his whole party are a bunch of con men. We already know they are liars and criminals, and we can't expect decency out of them. So when something like this goes down, you gotta blame the people in charge of catching criminals, or catching liars in this case. Democratic Party in New York is very much run to keep conservative Democrats in charge. They spend most of their resources dunking on progressives, and I'm using too much slang here. They spend most of their resources hampering the efforts of progressives, doing everything they can to keep progressives out of office. They put more energy into blocking progressives than they do actually running against right-wing psychopaths and con men like this guy. I do love the Daily News' headline there. He is indeed a man. It's so much worse, though. Here's a New York Times article on George Santos. Let's have a gander here. Mr. Santos, a New York Republican who was elected in November to represent parts of northern Long Island and northeast Queens, confirmed some of the key findings of a New York Times investigation into his background, but sought to minimize the misrepresentations. My sins are embellishing my resume, he said, stretching the truth yet again. Mr. Santos told the New York Post in one of several interviews he gave on Monday. Mr. Santos admitted to lying about graduating from college and making misleading claims that he worked for Citigroup or Goldman Sachs. To clarify, what he had said was that he worked for a company that worked for Goldman Sachs. That was the excuse he gave about why he said he worked for Goldman Sachs. Boy, that's a stretch. He once said he had a family-owned real estate portfolio of 13 properties. On Monday, he admitted he was not a landlord. Well, admitting he was not a landlord is one of the few things that could actually get me to like him more. But oh boy, here's where it gets shadier. This is where we start getting to spy movie stuff. Mr. Santos acknowledged that a string of financial difficulties had left him owing thousands to landlords and creditors. So a couple of years back, this guy owes money to people. He's got no money. But he failed to fully explain, or explain at all, actually, in the interview, how his fortunes reversed so significantly that by this year, he was able to lend $700,000 to his congressional campaign. The guy cannot pay off his landlords. He cannot pay off people that he has borrowed money from. 1 year. And another year, he's got an extra $700,000 to lend to his campaign. That right there bears investigation from the Department of Justice, led by Merrick Garland, a coward. Mr. Santos also firmly denied committing a crime anywhere in the world, even though the Times had uncovered Brazilian court records showing that Mr. Santos had been charged with fraud as a young man after he was caught writing checks with a stolen checkbook. Okay. All of that is to say, he's a con man. The guy's a con man. He's a criminal. But he's a criminal that got financed. Now, who would finance this guy? Well, it's a great question you've asked, Jake. I'll answer it. Also, Jake, Santos had long courted. This is from the Daily Beast. By the way, the links to all of this media is in the description. I recommend you check out, above all else, Brian Tyler Cohen's channel. It is wonderful. Santos had long courted conservative media attention by presenting himself as a walking, living, breathing contradiction, a gay Latino millennial born in New York City who is also a fervent devotee of ex-President Donald Trump, himself a con man and criminal. For much of his professional career, which included a stint as regional director at an alleged Ponzi scheme, my God, the Republican used the name George DeVolder. However, as he ventured further into the world of politics, he began increasingly using the name George DeVolder Santos, or simply George Santos. So this is establishing his con man cred. DeVolder Santos had, well, that's the very same, that is the very same slide, but this isn't. He had, so now we see where he gets a little odd. He does take up a firm political stance on something. He had insisted that Ukraine welcomed Russians into their provinces. They're getting invaded by Russia, as an apparent reference to President Vladimir Putin's 2014 invasion to prop up rogue separatist parties, and that Ukrainians in the East feel more Russian than Ukrainian, even though every single Ukrainian province overwhelmingly voted for independence in 1991. Soviets were collapsing back then, and Ukraine were among the leaders in saying, hey, we don't want to be run by these crazies anymore. We are our own country. It was not the first time DeVolder Santos had parroted Kremlin talking points. Kremlin is, like us saying White House talking points. In the weeks before Putin's brutal, blundering attack upon his Western neighbor, the candidate repeatedly took to Twitter to accuse President Joe Biden of plotting to start a war with Russia and deploy American troops in Ukraine. Well, look, that's bad, all right? that in and of itself is enough to make me think, okay, he's compromised, certainly. But it could be explained away as he himself has fallen for Russian propaganda. It's not like this guy took money from the Russians. Oh, wait. But unreported until now is that by the time DeVolder Santos made these statements, his congressional ambitions had already received a $32,800 boost from a controversial figure linked to the uppermost echelons of the Russian regime, and that support would more than double in size during the months ahead. The cash came from Andrew Intrater and his wife, who variously listed her occupations as a homemaker and analyst for Falcon AI, one of her husband's subsidiary firms. Intrater's main venture is today called Sparrow Capital, but it previously used the name Columbus Nova, and its primary function has long been to manage the investments of Intrater's cousin, Viktor Vekselberg, one of Putin's wealthiest and most influential courtiers. All right, the relevance here, folks, if you don't know what the Russian oligarchs do, they are the business wing of Putin's propaganda and influence network. When Putin needs an American to do his bidding, he goes through oligarchs most commonly. It's very easy for Putin to bribe people in the U.S. and politicians in the U.S. in this way. So, talking of Columbus Nova, the rebrand came just months after the Department of Treasury froze almost all of the company's assets for its tight ties to the heavily sanctioned Vekselberg. The following year, Intrater became a national figure when it surfaced that his firm had paid $500,000 to longtime Trump fixer Michael Cohen, and the pair had exchanged hundreds of phone calls and text messages during the 2016 campaign. Do not forget, Trump himself is bought by Putin. Do you recall Trump trying his darndest to make America love Putin? He sure got his base to. They parrot Russian talking points. So what did Santos, this con man, get? Or what did he give in exchange for these Russian bribes? And what will he be continuing to give? Things like this. This is his Twitter account when he's running for Congress. Joe Biden is willing to start a war in Eastern Europe and send American soldiers to a deadly combat zone. Whenever was it discussed, except by right-wingers, that Americans would actually physically get involved in the war, beyond those brave men and women who have volunteered for the territorial defense of Ukraine? Send American soldiers to a deadly combat zone to protect Ukraine's border, but fails miserably to protect the American southern border. This administration is a colossal failure, top to bottom, no exceptions. He's trying to fire up racists and switch the conversation from Ukraine's borders to America's borders. These are unrelated topics of conversation. Forget where you stand politically. It is a statement of fact that the big three in the world right now, in terms of military powers, are in order: the United States, then a country mile of distance, then China, then Russia. And militarily, those are really the only countries that make America nervous at all. We are competing for dominance on the world stage. Whether or not you think we should be is irrelevant. The fact is we are. There are few things that are better for America's aims than Russia draining its resources, trying to take over a country it will not succeed in taking over. The way the U.S. is assisting Ukraine Now, morally, they should anyway. Morally, of course they should. But the way we are assisting them is essentially giving them our old stuff. We're giving them military equipment that we really don't use ourselves anymore, but is still way better than anything Russia's got. And they are using it because they are tough as nails. These people are harder than woodpecker lips. They are using it to beat the stuffing out of the Russian armed forces. And Russia is having to expend its fuel. Russia's having to weaken itself in just about every way it can in order to keep this war going. Regardless of how you feel about wars, for you not to be in support of America supporting Ukraine here, either because it's the moral thing to do or because it benefits America directly and massively, and there is no more efficient use of our dollars than supporting this in terms of our national defense. For you not to be, you got to be bought by somebody, and George Santos is bought by the Russians. They also got this for their money. Same thing a little bit later. We are going to enter a war in the middle of the Eastern Europe winter against Russia to defend the sovereignty of Ukraine. Meanwhile, this is the site at the U.S. southern border where our sovereignty is no longer a priority. And then he showed a picture of a bunch of people standing in a river. I didn't even want to bother to verify if that picture was just a random picture of people standing in a river or not, so I didn't include it. Doesn't matter. These two things have nothing to do with each other. But he wants to make it about that because he's been paid to. It is amazing to me that this guy was able to get through the cracks like he did. There's a whole lot of blame to be had, but first and foremost has to go to the New York Democratic Party. Let's get to what you can do about it, then we got a fun bit. For Hobbs, what you can do is tell Hobbs that you approve. Katie Hobbs, governor-elect, tell her on social media that you're glad to see her doing what she can to hold Kari Lake accountable. Believe it or not, it is so much more common to see if you're new to politics, this might seem strange to you. If you're not, you're tired and I'm sorry. But it's so strange to see a Democrat actually taking available shots at their opponents, especially when they deserve it. In this case, if you see Katie Hobbs on social media, or if you live in her state and you are there, if you're able to contact her, you should be. Write an email, give her a phone call, just tell her you support her. As for Santos, what you can do. Here's the medicine, followed by a spoonful of sugar. The medicine is you can't do anything about Santos. We got a Russian plant in the house, essentially, now. And with America's pathetic attention span, most likely this will be forgotten about. Even when the guy is doing obviously pro-Russian propaganda, right on the floor with a microphone paid for by the American people. You can't do anything till it's time to vote again in New York. If you're from New York, make sure you're ready to vote in 2 years. However, to get, revenge. However, what you can definitely do right now is tell the Democrats of your state, no matter what state it is, that you want New York Democratic leadership changed. Why any state? Well, first of all, way more important, if you're from New York, contact the Democrats. Email, call, tell them you want that leadership changed. But why from any state? Because they do all get together. They do all talk. And they are learning now that the American people have become more politically savvy. It's a statement of fact. We have. And congratulations to you, by the way, if you're one of them. If you're watching from outside this country, by the way, I'm sorry. Man, we're working on it. We're trying to get our shit together. Republicans are an issue. Conservatives are an issue all around the world. I know we got to get ours under control, and we are working on it. But if you live in the U.S., tell your Democrats to put pressure on the party as a whole. It's as simple as that. Social media, email, phone calls. Just put pressure on them. Now, a little treat for you if you're like, man, I wish we could get back at those Russian oligarchs. Well, they do tend to get back at themselves from time to time. In this segment of Leopards and Wolves, we have a post by user Steffer, who points out that a Russian oligarch and member of Putin's United Russia Party has recently died by falling out of a window. For the context, why is this a leopard's eating of a face? This guy, as an oligarch, supported Putin. He's a member of Putin's party directly. He's part of the network that allows Putin to do the shady stuff that he does. Except he made the mistake of very gently recently criticizing the war in Ukraine, the Russian invasion of a sovereign country. And his punishment for that appears to have been that he got pitched out a window. So we have to take action in our world to make sure that justice does get done. But once in a while, once in a blue moon, justice is done for us. And ooh, is it tasty when it happens. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this today. I'll tell you what, I appreciate any likes I can get on a video. Leave a comment and let me know what you'd like me to look at. If there's something in American life that you would like to know what you can do about, it is my genuine pleasure to find answers to these questions for everyone. I like it. So let me know in the comments. Give it a subscribe if you'd like to see more of this sort of thing. This is what you can do. This is Wicked, which stands for what you can do. This has been your old pal Jake, and we'll see you next time. One day I'll get the outro correct.
Baby, this is all I got. Give me one encore. Yeah, there's certain things that I can't accept. I blame pride. No, this ain't the type of tape you eject. It's straight fire. No, this ain't the same face of regret. At the same time, it's like think back to the day that we met. I mean, I hate to admit crime, hate to admit lying, hate to admit buying the fact that the flames dying. Made up my damn mind to fix it. I've been trying. 1 minute we're all fine until we go offline.